So Andrew Kraszewski is, did I close? Kraszewski, all right. Andrew works with us at Hospital for Special Surgery. We just know him as Damn Andrew, because he is if you ever see us biking in Central Park in the morning, he's always the front of the peloton. Everyone's like, Andrew, slow down. Andrew is a mechanical engineer at the hospital and is working on his PhD at NYU. He's going to talk to us what he does. His research is on the mechanics of movement, and he's going to talk about the mechanics of what makes cyclists good.
Well, thank you, Jordan. My name is Andrew Kraszewski, and I'm here to talk to you today about the mechanics of optimal cycling. I have an engineering training, that's my background, and yes, I am at NYU pursuing my PhD in biomechanics. And so this talk will be a little bit more technical, but hopefully leave you with some information that you find useful, and hopefully also with some insight into cycling. So, when we talk about optimal cycling, we have to ask what is optimal. And the thing that comes to mind for me is when I was watching the 2005 Tour de France, and I believe it was the opening time trial, and basically Lance Armstrong was the last one to go. I think Jan Ullrich, he was, I think, second or two before Lance Armstrong, and basically in that race, Lance catches Jan Ullrich, passes him, and almost actually wins the time trial. But the point I want to make is, does anyone remember their cadences, their turnover rate of the pedals? Basically, Lance's had this high turnover rate. It was like 100 to 110 rotations per minute of these pedals. And when you look at Jan Ullrich, he had this very almost labored-looking, very slow, around 85 to 90 cadence for this time trial. And I'm not saying that either is necessarily better, but both of these guys have impressive resumes, perhaps one more than the other. But in any case, both are excellent cyclists, and they do their jobs differently. So right off the bat, you can see that they're not even moving for cadence. So thinking about cycling mechanics, there's three broad things that I think go into it: anatomy and physiology. Basically, you know, our anatomy are the way our length of our bones, our muscles, and all the chemical interactions that go on in there. The muscular coordination, basically kind of like our technique, how we move these muscles, you know, the timing in which we fire them, and also the posture, like on the bike. The mechanical system, we put our mechanical system, we put it on another mechanical system, and how it basically interacts with that. And those three things I look at as to contributing towards cycling mechanics. And from the cycling mechanics, basically we get our performance, whether the cycling mechanics are good or bad. It depends. So, this is supposed to be a video, so let me get out of here. All right. So, part of what I'm interested in is musculoskeletal modeling, and I just bring this model up. This is my data captured in our laboratory at HSS, the Leon Root Motion Analysis Laboratory. And basically, this is a program called OpenSim, but what I want to show you is cycling isn't necessarily just planar. You know, you view it from the side. Even though most of the motion occurs in the sagittal plane, so looking from the side, it's really a 3D motion. We can see the pelvis moving, and the red lines are actually representations of muscles. And play it again. And we can see how many different things are happening when we're cycling, and whether or not your seat is too high, too low, too far forward, too far back, or whatever. All these things, all these muscles are affected, and they're controlled by the joint angles and basically our posture on the bike. Brief overview, anatomy and physiology, the things that are important that we need to think about when looking at cycling mechanics. The muscles, both the quads, the extenders and the hip extenders, the flexors I mean, and also the muscles in the back, so your quads, the hamstrings, the calves, your glutei, those go into the equation. Looking at the muscle volume, or the potential cross-sectional area, the size of these muscles, which basically relates to the strength. Going deeper and more specifically into the muscles, we can basically break these down into muscle spindles, and down at the very the root level of the muscle, we have the protein fibers, the actin and the myosin, and the complex interaction with the excitation contraction coupling. So when the nerve fiber tells the muscle to contract, it's at this level. This is the basic, the root level things happening. It's complex, but basically we have ATP in the mitochondrial density. This also goes into cycling mechanics. This is also involved. And the way we might model muscles has a spring, the K, and there's also a contractile element, the CE in this. The muscle signal, the AT, and it's also our muscles basically act like a car spring, so it's also damped. And this is just a mechanical model. I don't want you to think too hard about that. But what we get out of it is we have two types of muscles as well. And one is the type 1, our slow fatiguing endurance muscle type, shorter muscle velocities. But also the red line is type 2, basically our fast twitch muscle fibers. So muscle fiber type composition, this plays a role. And basically what comes out of it is a graph that looks like this. It's a force velocity curve. So depending on how whether the muscle is lengthening or shortening, it will provide us with some sort of power output. And basically what we're concerned with the cycling is the right side of this graph, because that's where we're actually pushing and shortening our muscles is eccentric contraction. The only time we ever experience the left side of the graph is when, if you're on a fixie bike and trying to slow it down with your legs, that would be the left-hand side, and actually get more power, but basically we can't move forward. We can only decelerate with that sort of method. So muscle coordination, again back to our technique, what we would like to do is apply the force of the pedal perpendicular to the crank as much as possible. That gives us the greatest mechanical effectiveness, which I'll talk about in just a second. But basically we want the curve, the way we pedal, we want the way we apply the force to be on the left graph along the black circle. So we want it to be nice and symmetrical at all points around the circle, but we actually don't cycle like that. And what we find, it's asymmetrical, and there's a lot of error, and sometimes there's a lot of wasted energy. But we can also, through practice, so on the pre-graph is someone without cycling training, and on the left is someone with cycling training trying to make the most out of the entire revolution, around the revolution of the crank cycle. So it's so important to train our muscles to get the correct muscle memory so we can apply the force as effectively as we can around the crank. And talking about cadence, involves muscle coordination too, and we can see from some studies in the literature have found that around 90 RPMs is generally a good for decreasing most parameters like peak endurance, peak stress, force, muscle activation, or the total electrical activity in the muscle while cycling. And we can also see, this is another cadence-related slide, and basically along the bottom we can see how in the black line, see the dark line, that is the effective force, the force that's perpendicular to the crank cycle, that's the effective force. The total force is the rest of the force. And the further those two lines are from each other along the cycle is the more wasted energy. We can see the first graph is around 70 RPM, the next is around 120. The top one is actually very fast, around 170 RPM. We become, and what the top of the graph is saying, the higher we are at our maximal pedaling rate, our index of effectiveness, the way we apply the force around the pedal, it just gets lower and lower. We get more inefficient. If you ever try to pedal at like 170 RPMs, it's really hard to do. You're actually just trying to control your body from basically like leaving the bike. It's very difficult to do. So about this mechanical effectiveness, when we apply force to the pedal, it can come out two ways. One is two components. One is tangent to the path, or perpendicular to the crank. The other is along the length of the crank. Now, I think we can all realize that if we apply force along the green arrow, we're getting the most bang for our buck while we pedal. So total force can be in any general direction, but it has the two components, and it has the force of the tangent direction, force of normal. We want our force to be directed most in the tangent direction. So mechanical effectiveness is basically force in the tangent direction divided by the force total. And so if you have 0%, it's obviously all going in the normal direction. You're not moving your pedals. If it's 100%, you're doing a great job at applying force optimally to the pedal, because the pedal is the end result. where you apply the force of the pedal and how is really what makes the bike move. And so another graph in the literature is this is just crank torque at preferred cycling when you're trying to pedal in a circle at all points in the curve, just pulling, which is pulling up on the pedal and also just pushing down. What we can see is the index of effectiveness when trying to pull up is greatest, because usually when we pedal coming up on the backside of the pedal, it's usually the weight of our limb that's pushing back down, and so we're not getting positive effectiveness. We're actually getting negative effectiveness. We're actually, applying the wrong torque to the pedal. But if you have people pulling on it, you can have a higher index of effectiveness. However, the gross efficiency for that type of maneuver is actually much lower based on VO2 max, where basically preferred circling, pulling, pushing. Preferred is about the same as pushing down on the pedals because they're actually very similar. Pulling up is actually it's not physiologically very efficient, probably for a number of reasons. But it's not a normal sort of motion, even though we are being more effective around the crank. Here are some curves comparing elite cyclists and novice cyclists. And what I want to just come away from this is the elite cyclists have as far as pelvis, hip, knee, and ankle angles over on the left there, across the pedal stroke, they're generally much tighter curves, they're much more in control, they're not as variable as the novice cyclists. And we can see on the left-hand curve, it's a graph of ankle flexion, or ankle angle versus hip angle. The elite cyclist is on top, very smooth curves, very repeatable type of motion. You see the novice cyclist on the bottom, who has, its curves a different shape anyway, but also it's very wiggly, it's very variable, it's not very repeatable. This speaks to training and how important it is to get out there and ride your bike if you want to improve your cycling mechanics. This is one of my favorite slides from a researcher named Chapman in Australia. On the left is trained triathletes, middle's trained cyclists, more elite cyclists, and then novice cyclists, or newbies, I guess you could say, and just cycling. And this is muscle activity of selected muscles like tibialis anterior, your glutes, your calves, amongst other muscles, and you can see the difference between trained triathletes, basically the trained cyclists, and the rest of the world, I guess, here. So trained cyclists have these very defined pulses of muscular excitation, whereas novice cyclists and trained triathletes, they have this, what I believe he coined the term as demodulation. So it's very telling, showing that how muscular coordination is very important, especially for top athletes. I have another video here to show you. This is a video of, it's kind of what we do in the lab, actually what I've done it myself in the lab. And it's somewhere. There it is. That's a graph. That's me cycling, basically using our three-dimensional motion analysis system. Basically what we can do is measure the posture, three-dimensional joint angles of basically the musculoskeletal system. So I'm going to show that time here. Up to it. We basically call that posture as the relative angle between our segments in our body. And so what I did, I collected some data, I put some EMG electrodes on me, so I measured the muscle activity in my preferred, this is this first slide, the preferred seating position on my bicycle. And then I switched it. I moved my seat all the way forward. It's about 10 centimeters. It doesn't sound like a big distance, but look what happens to these curves. I'll go back and do it again a few times, and we can see that the shape of these curves changes as well as the timing does too. And I think, and this is really very telling, and just a basic changing the configuration of your bike, what it can do. And also we can see postural changes like the trunk, forward, backwards angle, it can change muscle EMG activation, as well as pedal posture. Moving the pedal back on your cleats is actually a good thing to do because it actually reduces the moment about the ankle joint and Achilles tendon, so it reduces that stress in there. Actually, for triathletes, it's important because it would save you on the run, which is a very important leg of the triathlon. And it also shows that, the study showed that VO2 max economy did differ between these cycling positions. So it would probably behoove us to actually move our pedals back towards the back of our feet. So my basic point in all of this is, what are optimal cycling mechanics? Well, whether you're doing cyclocross, if you're a track cyclist, you're a triathlete, you're a mountain biker, Tour de France rider or any other cycling discipline, I believe it really depends, but what you need to do is ride your bike, train hard, and also train safe. Well, thank you very much.
So he's going to help us in the break. He's going to help everybody get a green line, which seems like I want that green line, dude. Thanks, Andrew.